welcome. My name's Jessica. This is the Needle and Floss. This is a channel all about cross-stitching, knitting, and all crafty goodness. If you want to support, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel extra inclined, there is a link down below to buy me a coffee. You can find me on Instagram at The Needle and Floss, and I have an Etsy store, The Needle and Floss, also linked down below. You might have noticed something already. I finished the shawl, guys. So I felt extra motivated after my last video to finish it, so I just knocked it out. So when we saw each other last, I think I had just started the wavy border. I think. It's been a while and I've done a lot of knitting. So as you can see, I've finished it. I've never finished anything this big before, by the way, which is a crazy accomplishment. I've also only been knitting since February. So I feel like this is kind of crazy that like I'm knitting shawls and it's got like crazy cool color work. I was also really motivated to finish it because we had a few days of not cold weather, but moderate weather. And I was like, this is shawl weather. And I just was knitting and knitting and knitting. It's like, gotta get it done before it gets way too hot. And then I finished it and we had, I think, 2 days before the temperature started rising again. But yeah, I finished blocking it just a few days ago. And so like these last 2 days, I haven't worn anything except for like a t-shirt and a shawl. But I am so loving how soft it is and how cozy it is. I didn't know if I was gonna be a shawl person because I've never had a shawl before. And I didn't know if it would really be my style. Still TBD, but I love this so much that I'm gonna make this work even if it's not like a regular wardrobe staple. I think this is gonna be like one of those funky and unique pieces. This is a West Knits shawl called Winter Lights Shawl. You can find it on Ravelry, and all of the yarn I used was Knit Picks yarn. I think the other reason I was able to finish this so quickly is I've kind of felt under the weather the past week, which you'll see I didn't really do a ton of cross stitching. And that's because now that I've started knitting, when I don't feel very good, I tend to knit instead of cross stitch just because it's more mindless for me. The knitting patterns, even this, it wasn't a hard pattern. I mean, there's color changes, but it was a relatively easy knit. But when I don't feel good, I can just knit, knit, knit. So these past couple weeks, I got a lot of knitting done. And I got some cross stitch done. I've got some cross stitch to show you, but this is the highlight, I think, for me. My snuggly, snuggly shawl. I love it. Ah. So today I have more knitting to show you. And then I only touched 4 cross stitch projects over the past 4 weeks, which is not a lot for me. But again, I wasn't feeling well. I got my second COVID vaccine. So that was something. I'm so happy. I'm a few days away from my 2-week after full immunity date. So that's really exciting. But I think I just felt under the weather after that vaccine. And then allergies hit me pretty bad. So like I said, I've just been knitting, knitting, knitting. And speaking of knitting, knitting, knitting away, I also finished another pair of socks. Now these are way too big for me. These are socks for my husband, but I've already washed them. And I was kind of concerned because the yarn that I was using, it's Muse from Knit Picks in Adventure Speckle. But it kind of felt a little scratchy, not really scratchy, but definitely not as soft as Stroll, which is what I knit my first pair of socks in. But they softened so much after I took them out of the wash. And they're superwash too. I just love the concept of superwash yarn. But I'm really proud because these are the first pair of socks that I've knit not for me. So I didn't ask him to try them on while I was knitting them. I went purely from calculations that I found on the internet, just, you know, based on your shoe size, how long to make the foot. And it worked great. He says they fit perfectly. The only thing he would change, he said, was the size of the cuff. Because I think there's only, looking at it, it's like half an inch. And then I think I only have 7 rows of ribbing, which was his request. He wanted a super short cuff. But now that he's worn them, he says that he might want a longer cuff next time. And what I might do too is, this is a 2x2 ribbing. I might go down to a 1x1 just so that it's a little bit more grippy. And that's really the only thing that he's noticing, is that he feels like these don't feel as grippy as socks that he's used to. So I think that's going to be remedied by a longer cuff and a tighter rib. But otherwise, I'm super happy. I got 2 fully finished objects this week. One for me, which is something I've been working on a while, and my first knitting project for someone else. So because I finished a pair of socks, I needed to start another one. And because I had just finished knitting socks for my husband, it was my turn. I already had yarn picked out, and so I was itching to use it. So I have these guys started, and this is actually the sock pattern, or this is actually the type of socks that really inspired me to try to start knitting. And this is the Hermione's Everyday Socks. And you can find them on Ravelry. It's a free pattern, but it's got this gorgeous texture. And of course it was Shiloh who was knitting them, the epic sock knitter on Flosstube. And hers were gorgeous, and that was what made me want to start knitting socks. So I picked out this yarn from, again, Knit Picks. It's literally where I buy all my yarn right now. And this is in a hawthorn, and I really don't remember what colorway this is. And I didn't bring down any of my yarn tags. So if you really want to know what colorway this is, drop me a comment below, and I'll let you know. The one thing, I love this color. The one thing though is my husband was watching me knit this. He said it reminds him of like those really old 90s cups that you got at the mall with like the blue and purple wave on them. So now I can't unsee that. And it's just gonna be, these are just gonna be my 90s socks, which I'm totally fine with. I'm here for it. I'm totally here for it. My childhood was of the 90s, so I'm just gonna embrace it. So that concludes all of the knitting, which leads into my one finish for now cross stitch, and that is the Zodiac Signs Stitch Along by Tiny Modernist. So I'm gonna stand up just because this is getting super big for me to show. But right now I am finished. Well, when I was working on it this past 2 weeks, this was a finish for April. I am filming this on the 1st of May, so we now have the first sign of the second row. But I haven't started on it, and I won't start on it till later this month. So I'm considering this a finish for now, because we've got Taurus, which I'm really digging because that's like a super southwest kind of vibe and feel. Like, look at those suns and the cactus. Yeah, I'm really, really liking it. I broke my no-buy. I've been planning on adding beads to this, but I don't have the right colors. So I needed to buy some to do some tests. So I did get those from 123 Stitch. So I'm probably going to start picking out what beading colors I want to do. And the beads are, what it is the frame has little confetti stitches around it, which makes it look a little bit more celestial and a little less Art Deco. But I wanted to give it some sparkle, so I wanted to do them in beads instead of just single stitches. So what I need to do is, now that I have the beads, I can start seeing which colors I like best. But yeah, finished for now. Zodiac Signs by Tiny Modernist. And this is on an 18 count. So this is pretty big. I would say this is a good 18 inches across. So this is a good size project. And this is on 18 count. So I know some people are stitching this on 16 and 14 counts, which, I mean, that's gonna be a huge project by the time you're finished. So I don't know, I almost could have gone down to a 20 count, but I've never used a 20 count Ada. I think I might want to try that with something. I just had to find the right project. When I finished the April pattern release for Zodiac Signs, I moved on to my Made to Create because that had just gotten released, and we now have the C. So you can see it's Crea. It's gonna say create. It just doesn't yet. But I love it. I've gotten the whole C. There's a couple other motifs up here. There's one right beside the camera. That's called a camera. It's a pin cushion, but it looks like a cupcake. So I'm really excited to stitch that. And then there's a thread spool up here where like there's a little piece of thread that kind of goes down and near the words too. Man, why didn't you tell me there was a fuzzy on this? There we go. I have a black hoodie, so that was totally fuzz from my black hoodie. So yeah, I just love this C though. Like, look at those colors. Oh my goodness. And this is, I don't think I've said this is the Made to Create stitch along done by Caterpillar Cross Stitch. It started in January and it's ongoing. There's only going to be 6 pattern releases. So right now we're on 4 of 6. So it's kind of a short stitch along. Like a lot of stitch alongs are a year long. This one's only gonna go till June. It just looks so cute. And usually this kind of style isn't something I'd really go with. It's almost a little too cutesy for me, but just the idea of something where it's the word create made completely out of things that are creative and things you do to make things. Like, I just couldn't say no to that. I just absolutely love the concept of this, and Sally from Caterpillar Cross Stitch is a genius. So there's really no going wrong with this. Now the stitch along, you could get kits. I just kitted it up myself with all the called for thread, and I'm using Vintage Country Mocha. It's a linen. I'm using 32 count. I'm definitely going to be using this fabric again though. It is very easy to work with. The next project I put a little bit of work on is City Feather. And this is where I am with it now. So what I was mainly working on is pretty much any yellow that you see. All of that yellow is new. I put some darker stitches in up top that are not black, but like 3799. So it's like that almost black. I put in up there. I did a little bit of the white. So not a ton, but I mean, it's getting progress, and you're starting to see that it's a feather, and you're starting to see a little bit of architecture in it. So yeah, I feel good about the progress. Now this is stitched on 28 count Helix from Picture This Plus. Helix is the colorway. And when I picked this up again, I'm not used to stitching on a 28 count over 2, which is what this is. When I do that, I use 3 strands. So I picked this up and I was doing yellow all in 2 strands because that's what I'm used to stitching with. And then I finished a whole color and realized I'm supposed to be using 3 strands. Thankfully, they were all half stitches, so I just went back with a single strand and redid all of the stitches. So I basically just stitched an extra strand over all the stitches I had already done. I didn't feel like ripping it out, and it just seemed like that was the easier fix to do. But yeah, it's coming along. And it's actually a pretty small pattern. This whole, trying to look at it. See kind of where these stitches, this line is, where I've stopped? Like that's kind of the edge of a page. And then the page kind of goes down to here. So like there's really only one big page, and then there's like other pages that have little parts of the feather off to the sides. So I'm really just working on that main page, and then as the colors kind of carry over into the other pages, I'm working on those. But it just feels like it's coming along really quick. And I know that once I'm done, it'll be a lot of back stitching, but back stitching seems to go quick for me. So it really is just a matter of when this comes up for me again and when I work on this next. If I were to only stitch on this, I could probably finish this out in a week. I just don't know when I'm gonna pick it up again. But it's not for lack of liking it. It's just, I have so many other whips to work on. So last, but certainly not least, I put some more work into Disney Castle, and I feel like I got a lot of work done. I'm really starting to knock out that bottom corner, and I'm starting to come across the bottom and finish the bottom of the castle and kind of that under landscaping side. I'm just loving it. I'm loving the colors. I love everything about this piece. And for reference, this is what it'll look like when it's finished. This is Disney Castle by Mandarink's Design. I'm stitching this on a 32 count Jobelin in the colorway Summer Sky, which I mean, this looks like it takes place during summer. So I think Summer Sky was the perfect colorway for it. And looking at how the sky is starting to peek through, like I absolutely no regrets. I can see myself using this again as well for other projects. If there's not stock issues, of course, because there's so many fabric stock issues. So this is really what I've been working on, is like this bottom little section. And as I continue to work on it, I'm just gonna go all the way across and finish to that bottom corner. But yeah, every time I pick this up, I fall in love with this piece all over again. And this is actually my longest whip. Up until recently, my longest whip was from like 2013 or 14. It was a really long time ago. But now I'm pretty caught up. And so I only started this last November, and I would have been finished by now, except for I just picked up so many other whips, and I've been trying to kind of split my time across everything. Up until recently, I've been a pretty solo stitcher. I'll focus on maybe 1 or 2 stitch alongs, and then I'll have a focus piece or a project kind of on the side. So I would finish things relatively quickly, but now I have like 13 whips and it's a little crazy. Which brings me into plans. So the past few years, I've thought about doing Stitch Mania, and this was back, like I had just said, I was really only working on like 3 projects at once, maybe 4. And even that seemed like a lot to me. So the idea of Stitch Mania and having so many new starts, that was overwhelming to me, and I never really had an interest in participating. This year, and I understand that she's done this in years past, but I hadn't heard about it. But this year I heard Stephanie from Lindy Stitch's version, which is Stitch Sania. And that rang true to me. Even right now, starting 4 new projects is almost too much because I have so many other projects going on right now. Like, I need to get some finishes under the belt. But I already have other projects kitted up. So if they're just sitting there kitted up already, I kind of thought I'll just start them. I don't know. So what Stephanie has set up for Stitch Sania is you work on a focus piece, or you set a goal from Monday through Friday. And if you meet that goal, or if you're happy with what you got done on either like an old whip or like a focus piece, something like that, then you get rewarded with a new start. So that's what I'm gonna be doing. At first, I thought I was gonna do every single weekend in May, but because I haven't really been stitching that much in the past 2 weeks, and we're already in the first weekend of May, I'm gonna start it next weekend. And I'm not gonna show you what I'm gonna start yet because I haven't decided. But that's kind of part of the magic, at least for me, for Stitch Sania, is when I reward myself with that new start at the end of the week, I want to just start whatever I feel like. I don't want it to be planned. It's just, this is what I feel like stitching on, so I'm gonna stitch on it. And I'm gonna love it. Because there's a couple that I've been really itching to start. But during the week, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm going to continue work on my stitch alongs. So you've already seen Zodiac Signs and Made to Create. So I'm gonna finish Made to Create's current pattern release with the C and the thread spool and the cupcake little pin cushion. I'm gonna finish that. And then Zodiac Signs and There Is No Planet B, which I didn't show this week, but it still exists. Those two will have pattern releases that I'll also be working on. In addition to those, I'm gonna put more work into Disney Castle, since this is my oldest whip. So usually during the week, I split my time between working on SALs and spinning a whip wheel, and then just choosing a random whip work in progress that I already have going. So instead of spinning my whip wheel, I'm just gonna work on Disney Castle. So it'll really be like business as usual during the week for me, but just when I'm not working on a stitch along, I'll be working on this. Then during the weekend, I'll be doing some new starts. So that'll be fun. I still haven't decided what I'm gonna do yet, but we'll see. We'll see. They're already kitted up. It's just, like I said, figuring out which one I wanna do. And that's what I'm gonna be working on. Stitch Sania, and when I feel like knitting, gonna work on the socks. Pretty simple. But I'm curious what you guys are gonna do for May. Are you guys participating in Stitchmania? Sania? Something else? Let me know about down below. And I'll see you again in another couple weeks. See you guys.